Danny here. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna go ahead and talk about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. We have recently seen the movie, so we just kind of wanted to have an open spoiler discussion about the movie and some of our thoughts, impressions, and even theories going into the Edge of Spider-Verse, which is the third movie in the trilogy. So, Dan, man, just to kind of get started with you, you want to give me your overall impression of Spider-Verse across the Spider-Man across the Spider-Verse?
It was a great movie. Just an overall entertaining film, great animation, great characters, a great story. Just overall, they nailed all aspects of a good movie. For as long as it ran, it was never felt too long. There was plenty of action. It was very compelling. And for an animated film, they kept it very consistent with how well the pacing was, and overall, just a really good movie.
Same here, man. I really loved it. I have to start by saying that I loved the first movie, Into the Spider-Verse. Like, I really loved that movie, and this one I was really, I don't want to say surprised because I expected it to be good, right? But it exceeded my expectation. I knew it was going to be a good sequel, but it just really took it to that next level. And to me, it actually felt like it felt like the second part of a three-part movie, right? Like this is definitely that conclusion, not the conclusion, but that climax. It was sort of like Empire Strikes Back, right? You had Star Wars, which was, the beginning of this franchise, but Empire just took it to this whole other level. It was a pretty darker movie as far as tone went. And the Spider-Verse was the same way. You kind of got to see a little bit of the dark side of things, which also reminded me of Back to the Future, when Marty McFly goes into the alternate timeline and he just sees the differences, and that's kind of where the direction that they took this movie into, especially towards the end. But what I really loved, loved about this movie was the art direction. There were just scenes in this movie where it was like pure art. Like you were just walking into an art gallery and just watching animated versions of paintings, live paintings, especially when they went into Spider-Gwen's universe, and there was that scene with her and her father, and it was really emotional. It was raining outside. Like, it was like this moving watercolor. And even when her and her father were they were sort of like coming to, an understanding and a forgiveness, the way the color changed, right? It was from like this cold hue to like this really warm color. It was just so awesome with the way they used animation as a tool, right? Not just as a medium, but to actually utilize it to tell a story. Which I love that. Everything was so intentionally done. But what did you think about the art direction, the art style, and even the animation?
Well, I liked it all. And it was very complex animation. There's so many. There's parts of it that's supposed to intentionally be 3D. There's parts of it that's very blurry or loose. There's parts of it that are tight, very defined lines. So it's a mix of a lot of things, which they did in part one. And they continued it with this one, where some of it is easygoing. It's a mix of a lot of art forms, and I'm glad that you mentioned it's that you enjoy how you really enjoy it visually, and the art behind how visually stunning it is. For me, the part of the art that got to me about it was the writing between the characters, and how they some of them have camaraderie, some of them have tension, some of them have just these emotional aspects of it in the writing. And that's the part of the art in the writing that got to me, where I'm like, yo, somebody put this together, or a collaboration of it was put together to really make a very emotional story behind a lot of these with these different Spider-Verse characters. And it was very intense. at
Yeah,
a
intense, compelling, emotional.
Yeah. So visually, like you acknowledge like visually, it's very stunning, and it is. And for me, the even more stunning thing was how it was put together and written, because the lines
Yeah.
that they said was like, wow, like that's how you feel, like,
Hmm.
and if you're paying attention to the characters, that's what a lot of the story was, how everybody's feeling, right down to the last few moments with the revelation of where Miles is and the situation he finds himself in. He's trying to even talk himself into like, hey, do you really feel like we don't have to do this, like let's all just calm down kind of situation. And so yeah,
Yeah.
art direction,
Yeah, and
all aspects was great.
yeah, and I agree with you in regards to the writing. Like, they nailed it because even with the secondary characters, like Miles's parents, you got them a little bit more fleshed out. You got to see the dynamic between Officer Morales. And Rio, his mother, and I just love the dynamic because every time Miles would do something wrong and the mom would get upset, the dad would be like, "Ooh, like I know you just did it." Like he'd be almost instigating, like, "Did you
Yep.
just say this to your mother?" Which is really awesome, and even. Culturally, being Puerto Rican myself, and just having the mom talking about, oh, I was born in Puerto Rico and this and this, and I love that joke where she was like, yeah, I hear this new Spider-Man could be Puerto Rican, and Miles is just trying to throw her up, and he's like, yeah, I heard he could also be Dominican. Which, there were some jokes in this movie that if you were Latino, you were Hispanic, you totally got.
Yeah.
Towards the very end, when Miles is confessing to his mother, oh, I'm Spider-Man, whatever, she's laughing and she's like, so what you trying to say? You shoot webs out of your culito? Yo, I was dying, man. Not a lot of people laughed in the theater because, it's Spanglish, but to me, it was just like, yeah, that's totally what a mom would say.
Yeah. Just like the jokes you mentioned, they were all great. They did land. It felt culturally relevant. Like you could relate to everything that they were saying, as far as whether it's just your mom or just your dad talking to you. If you're part of that culture, you kind of get what they're really talking about, because of their with the mom with the Caribbean background, and even the dad just being from Brooklyn in New York, me being from
Mhm.
New York, or you being from New York, like you kind of get like that vibe of like
Yeah.
the old school parenting, that it's just like no games, and it's like that's why the dad was always like, oh, you sure you want to go that route with your mom, because you know how tough she'll get. And it's not
Yeah.
in a menacing way, it's more like in a strict way, like
Hmm.
know your boundaries. And I like that camaraderie between the parents and how they align to discipline their son.
I did like that this movie was as much Gwen's as it was Miles.
Yeah.
She opened the movie. That opening sequence with her was really, really awesome. Like I was super engaged. I was so into it, and the fact that there was this, that was almost like a prelude
Hmm.
to the actual beginning of the movie,
Yeah.
because once that scene with her is over and she's being taken to Spider headquarters or whatever, then you get the Spider-Verse movie logo, then it goes into Miles' story, and then the actual movie begins at that point, right? Which was a really interesting way for them to open the movie, introduce us to what's been going on with Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, before we even brought Miles into the picture. Which, speaking of Miguel O'Hara, Oscar Isaac killed it in that role. But what did you think of Spider-Man 2099? Were you familiar with that character prior to this movie, and what were your thoughts?
I wasn't familiar with him that much. The only time I've actually seen, or like just my encounter with a 2099 version, has been in a old PS3 Spider-Man game, and so
Hmm.
I wasn't familiar with it, but
Mm.
I did like the portrayal. I like how Oscar Isaac was voicing the character. The emotion behind it when he got angry was great and on point, and like really fit with everything that was being animated. It was very interesting to see how much control Miguel O'Hara wanted to have, and
Yeah.
how to sort of dominate everything that's happening. And Miles Morales, just being like, no. And going
Yeah.
back to what you're just saying about with Gwen, it's great that I think that how much she's being included in these movies without her presence not being overbearing. Maybe that's not the right term or word, but just like she's a big part of the story as a as a co-star. She's a co-star.
Hmm.
It really shows, and it's really great how her story is developing with her parent, her dad, and how it's juxtaposed against what Miles is going through, where
Hmm.
his parents communicate with him and they try to talk to him and he talks to them back, whereas Gwen's almost polar opposite, and she can't really talk to her dad that much, or like because of his position, even though Miles's dad is also in the same similar position, and
Right.
but and their struggle, they're going through like their own struggles, and it's great to see Miles going through his different thing, and her going through something else, which is I guess
Yeah.
teenage life.
Yeah, but everything that she was going through and he was going through was almost parallel, to the point where when she went through her full story arc, by the end of it, and she reconciled with her father, she realized the potential loophole, right? The solution to be able to help Miles, but also prevent a canon event from not happening, right? Because that was the whole deal with this movie, was, hey, some things are just meant to happen and we shouldn't be changing them. And Miguel O'Hara was such a tragic character because he lost his wife and daughter twice, right? It wasn't just once, it was twice where he lost her. He found her in another reality where he had died instead of them, and he tried to live a normal life with them, and it didn't work out because apparently it caused an incursion, which that's not what they called it in the movie, but it does tie to the MCU, which we'll kind of talk a little bit about that later. But Oscar Isaac's character, Miguel O'Hara, was the antagonist of this movie, right? He was the antithesis of what Miles was. And then, right in the middle, you had Gwen, but you also had Peter B. Parker with his little baby girl, Mayday Parker, which
Yeah.
was pretty cool. Before we jump into the rest of the Spider-Mans, what did you think of the Spot, right? While Miguel O'Hara was the antagonist of the movie, the Spot was the villain, right? But it was almost his origin story, because we didn't see his potential, or at least the story didn't show his potential until the movie continues moving along. At the very beginning, he was like an oddball, right? Miles was just laughing at him, but he became such a powerful villain. Like, he became a multiverse level threat. So what was your thought on the Spot?
He was an awesome villain because he wasn't like super powered like that, where it was like where he could do such physical damage, or like skilled at combat, and like all these like mechanical things that he could use against Spider-Man. But he was just, his origin, which we see in the movie, is just sort of a regular guy caught up in the wrong thing, and now he has this ability. And
Yeah.
and it was great to see that something so simple could turn out to be such a catastrophe, and such a disaster for somebody like Miles. And it's something so like not overbearing, but it just kind of led into the story of like, now we're here because of this. And
Yeah.
yeah, so something so simple just caused so much chaos. And
Yeah, and that was kind of like the underlining, right, of the story, is like that cause and effect. Every action you take has a consequence, which was a great setup in the first movie that paid off in this movie.
and I think they'll continue to do that right down to the end, where everything still connects to that first film, So it's a
Hmm.
very long story. It's really an embedded trilogy, and so which is
Yeah.
exciting to see for the third part how this all still keeps it rolling with the same story, like and as trilogy should be, but this is very intertwined, and
Yeah.
so yeah, it's
Yeah,
cool.
and I like how you put that, the embedded trilogy, because it just like the first movie directly leads into the second one. As we see the second one, the way it ended is going to directly lead into the third one, because the second movie pretty much ended in a cliffhanger, right? The main story wasn't completely resolved, right? Miles still wants to go save his pop. He's in a completely different universe that he wasn't intending to go. So it's one long narrative split up into three different movies, which is great, right? It's like Lord of the Rings. It was one long narrative, but from the books to the movies, they were all split into three, and it works, man. I think this is, if they nail that third movie, man, it is gonna certainly be one of the best trilogies, like movie trilogies, period. Not even animated form, just movie, because that's the thing about Spider-Verse. So far, they're two for two, and these aren't just animated movies made for kids to, get people to laugh. No, like these are like straight drama superhero films, with science fiction. It caters to the adults, but it also caters to the young ones. But they've weaved such a great story so far, and I really, really hope that it continues into the third movie. Now, in regards to all the spider people that were there, was there a particular spider person that was your favorite or stood out the most, or was it just way too overwhelming and too many spider people?
I will say I did feel like it is overwhelming. Even with the first one, I was like, yo, there's a lot of different Spider-Man versions, and they were all great. I like how they display their own personalities and their own skills. With this
Their own
one,
animation style.
yeah, yeah. With this one, it's probably just cliche or whatever. I mean, he took up a nice chunk of the movie too, but I just like the Peter Parker and with his baby, and like that doesn't stop him from like going out to do what he needs to do. He's like, I'm just gonna take my kid with me, and
Yeah.
like carrying her around, and the fact that the baby has like powers. It's just funny to me that he comes home. He's like, oh, you were out on a mission again, huh? Like, I like the dynamic between that Peter Parker and Miles Morales because he's the one that was training him, and
Hmm.
he's trying to. He's still trying to like teach him things and to sort of be a mentor, and yeah, so it's just really interesting to see him as
Yeah.
a.
And what I really love too is that there was like this mutual, maybe disgruntled respect from Miguel O'Hara, because when they were having that whole conversation and Peter B. Parker tried to tell him something, he was like, and I've had pretty much enough of you. But it wasn't like he spoke down to him or anything. Like they were equals, right? Which was really interesting because Peter B. Parker is always throwing the jokes. You take him half seriously when he's
Yeah,
saying anything. Now he got the kid with him. He walking around with a robe and a baby carrier. It's like, okay, dude. I love the way the movie opened with Gwen and the movie ended with Gwen, right? She bookended the movie at the very end. She gathered the troops. I feel like this third movie is now going to be a little bit more intimate, like the first movie, right? I don't think we're going to see as many spider people as we saw in the second one. I think they're going to really back in. I think most of the Spider-Men or Spider people we saw at the very end of the movie are the ones who are going to be primarily in the third one. And I wouldn't even be surprised if there's some of those characters that actually die.
I like how Gwen has such a big part, and it's all very almost symbolic how she wasn't part of this band that she was playing with, and then
Yeah.
this movie she was like, I didn't feel comfortable being part of that band for her own reasons, but she said it. I'm starting my own band, and it's with a bunch of
Yeah.
Spider-Men, and they're gonna help Miles. And even with Peter B. Parker, how he had his not clashes, but like he went back home and at the end he's still like, I'm gonna go, help Miles, and that's why
Yeah.
I like him, because he's at the end, him and his baby are like, we're gonna do what we have to do, and
Yeah.
and, and that's what Spider-Man is always about. Great power, great responsibility.
Any final thoughts, especially with the way the movie ended? Miles is in another place, and any theories that you might have about the third movie?
I don't really have theories. I just watch stuff like that, like in real time. Like, I'm not trying to guess how far ahead, things are gonna go. But I do, again, going back to how they tie everything in and how intertwined the story is. Seeing Miles hooked up to the punching bag and tied up to how he's tied up to the punching bag is how Peter B. Parker was tied up in the first part. And he escaped from that, telling him, don't watch me, watch my hands, or don't watch what I say, or something like to that effect of like, stop watching my face, or my mouth, and listening to me. And he should be taking the lesson of watch my hands. Yeah. And at the end of the movie, we see how Miles is charging up to somehow get out of this entire situation, however he can, and so he's already like implementing, I guess, a lesson that he was taught by a mentor to get out of these kind of situations. Maybe it won't be that simple, and the charge just didn't work. But I'm thinking he's eventually going to get out of this, and what's about to happen with that Prowler, that version of Prowler, is going to be not as in depth as maybe we thought. Maybe more. I think it's gonna lead back to like the Spot, and there's gonna be other things. There's gonna be a whole bunch of other things that ending is. I think they'll move away from that pretty quickly. And yeah, and I think the actual story is gonna progress into a whole bigger situation.
I think they're throwing the audience off, making it seem like, oh, this is evil Miles because his uncle was bad. But, we're looking at a world where Spider-Man never existed. Lord knows if Peter Parker is even alive in this universe. Yeah. But Miles' dad didn't survive. Miles' dad died in that universe, right? So would that have potentially changed his brother, right? Would his brother have been a good person? Would Miles as the Prowler be a good guy, a vigilante who's trying to keep peace in New York City, right? Where meantime they're making it seem like it's like, oh man, Miles is a villain in this world because he never got bit by the spider, but it's Miles, right? And I think this is an opportunity for them to talk about Miles, not Spider-Man, but Miles, right? Even without spider powers, Miles is a good person at heart. Even without spider powers, Miles can make a difference and make an impact. So I'm really hoping they throw us off like that, because I can see, if they do that, I can see how they resolve whatever issues they can immediately in Universe 42, and like you said, they go back to the main story of, well, we need to put a stop to the Spot, right? So we'll see, man. I'm really looking forward to it,
because that's the thing. That third part is gonna be driven by, at least some part of it, Miles getting back to his own universe. Yeah. So that has to get resolved, because the last moments we saw, he has to get out of that, because in his mind, he's gonna be immediately thinking, how do I get back to my mother and dad? Because I have to save my dad. And so that whole situation really, I assume, can't last too long, because he has to figure out who he has to talk to get back to his universe, or who's he gonna run into, or will Gwen be the one traveling through all sorts of dimensions looking for him, and her running into different versions of Miles, and maybe even taking the wrong version and taking him back to somebody. So we might even just we'll probably get a surprise ending, actually.
Yeah. Hey man, we might get more Miles, we might get more Gwen Stacy's, you see different versions of these variant characters of Spider-Man, right? Because for the most part, Spider-Man is Peter Parker, but in other realities is someone else, right? But who's to say that there aren't more of those people in other universes, right? So it's going to be really interesting to see. But that pretty much does it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know if you watched Across the Spider-Verse, if you liked it, what you didn't like. If you enjoyed this video, leave a thumbs up, subscribe to stay up to date with my content, hit that notification bell, and until next time, that's a wrap. Thanks for watching.